Joining us now from the courthouse, NBC intelligence and national security reporter Ken Delaney and NBC News justice correspondent Pete Williams live outside the court. And here on set, former assistant U.S. attorney for New York's Southern District, Daniel Goldman, and NBC's legal analyst, Danny Savalos. I'm going to have to, this is one of those days where you put your coffee down, you turn your volume up, and you just try and understand what just happened. Ken, for anybody who has just joined us, who hasn't been with us for the twists and turns of this over the last 90 minutes or so, what has happened? And is this a good or a bad day for Michael Flynn?
It's not clear. I mean, the hearing did not go well for Michael Flynn, and that's why we are where we are. So I guess in that sense, it's a bad day, although he's not in jail. So that is somewhat a good development for him, because there certainly was the threat of that. Just to back up, Judge Emmett Sullivan began this hearing by tearing into the Flynn side about that filing that you just referenced, where he seemed to be suggesting that he was trapped by the FBI into lying, that he wasn't put on notice that it was a crime to lie to federal agents, and that therefore mitigated the crime to which he pled guilty. And the judge immediately began questioning Flynn as to whether he really was pleading guilty, whether he acknowledged his guilt. Flynn said that he did, but the judge clearly was bothered by that filing. And then it became clear, guys, that the judge was also very disturbed by the crime that Flynn has essentially admitted but did not plead guilty to, that of taking money from the Turkish government to secretly lobby the U.S. government while he was Donald Trump's advisor. Now, again, Flynn wasn't charged with that. He admitted it in his plea agreement, and yesterday 2 associates of Flynn were charged with conspiracy to violate the foreign agent laws in connection with that scheme. And the judge essentially said, "Sir, you've sold out your country." He appeared to be discussing that. And then later in the hearing, he said he was explaining that Flynn's cooperation with the special counsel was not completely finished, and as a result, he offered the defense a chance to postpone the sentence, because he said, "I can't guarantee that I'm not going to impose a sentence of confinement." And then he took a recess, and after the recess, both sides came back in, and the defense decided they would take Judge Sullivan up on his offer and have now postponed this for at least 90 days, guys.
All right, Pete, give us your take. What exactly happened in court today?
Well, I'd say this was a bad day for Michael Flynn, because both he and the lawyers for Robert Mueller expected a sentence of 0 prison time. Robert Mueller's prosecutor said it would be warranted and appropriate based on his cooperation. Remember, it was a year ago that he pleaded guilty in this courthouse, and since then he's been meeting with Robert Mueller repeatedly, 19 separate times. Now, what the judge strongly suggested today is that he was prepared to sentence him to some time in prison based on the seriousness of the offense. The judge said at one point that lying to the FBI inside the White House by a senior government official was a serious offense. And of course, there's the unregistered work that he did on behalf of the government of Turkey during the campaign. So the judge came on pretty strong. I guess the only hope for Michael Flynn to avoid some prison time is that if he continues to cooperate, and if the judge somewhat calms down, then perhaps when we come back here when it's warmer and I don't have to wear a hat, that he'll be able to get the sentence that he and his defense lawyers were hoping for, of just probation. So but the judge was not prepared to do that today.
And if in 90 days you still have to be wearing that hat, we have bigger problems, Pete. Thank you for that. Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there, and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.